Start the meeting, bring it to order here. Approval of summary minutes on February 7, 2014 meeting, rescheduled from February 4th, 2014 on the item agenda. Any discussion? If not, we'll look for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move we approve the minutes as printed.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Same sign opposed. Motion passes. Public hearing items. Number 2, application CU 14-2, filed by Sue Jones, requesting approval of a conditional use permit to allow a group care facility to be established in the R1 single-family district. We'll hear from city staff at this time.
Mr. Chairman, before we begin, the box of name isn't as plurific, or there aren't as many of those in Salina as there are Smiths or Joneses. However, I believe that Steve Box's father might have been my second cousin. I don't think that there's enough relation there to be cause any conflict, but because of the name, I wanted to disclose that and let everybody know right up front that, thank you.
All right, thank you. Dustin?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We'll start with the background of this particular property. This property is in the Bailey Heights edition, which was platted in 1954. The house that is the subject of the conditional use request is a dwelling that was built in November of 1955. There was a detached garage that was added on 4 years later. That was a 2-car garage, and that was constructed in 1959 and is shown in the photograph. The 2-car garage faces Kerwin and has a double-wide driveway there that leads to it. The original structure was addressed off of Lewis, as this is a corner lot, and there is a second driveway that faces Lewis that's difficult to make out, but you can, there it is, there's a better angle there, and that's a single wide driveway. So we have 2 driveways on this property. One is a single wide driveway and one is a double wide driveway. In August of 2013, the applicant approached city staff and requested a site visit, and that site visit was conducted with personnel from the fire department and development services, mainly the planning division and building services division, in looking at how the property could potentially be used for an emergency care facility. The applicant has a operation that she runs that houses children from the ages of 0 to 18 on an emergency basis when they don't have full guardianship, or if a guardian is removed from the situation because of a domestic dispute or some other situation and emergency care is needed before a more permanent home can be arranged. This is the solution that is used. And so the applicant was looking to have this operation here for up to between 7 and 8 children, and the hours would be 24-hour care, and the care would be provided by 2 staff members that would have 8-hour shifts apiece. So that's, in a nutshell, the operation history of the applicant. So back to this August 29th meeting that we had, the applicant had us come out there, do a site inspection, and look at the site and what it was that she was proposing to do. And the purpose of that meeting was to figure out what kind of classification the operation would fall into. And this is a little bit of a different situation because it doesn't fit into any of our boxes really cleanly. And so what staff did is we took a list of all of our different types of care facilities and residential facilities, and we lined up all of the definitions which we have there in the staff report, and examined what the applicant was proposing and to figure out which best fits the nature of the operation that the applicant was wanting to do. And after doing that exercise, the zoning administrator determined the applicant's proposed care home would fit most closely within the family care facility category, with one primary difference being that the children would not be disabled by the definition of the state. So that would be one of the caveats, but it seems that the operation fit most closely with that operation, or with that classification, and so that was a determination that we made. And with that determination came the idea that she could have up to 8 kids in a single-family dwelling without a conditional use permit. So she's permitted at this location to have up to 8 kids without seeking the conditional use permit. The conditional use permit, and the purpose of it, is to expand that to have 10 kids. So we're looking at 2 additional kids. Everything else would stay the same with the site. We wouldn't have any physical changes to the site, and we would still have 2 24-hour staff members on site for care and supervision of the children. So on October 24th, this was before the actual request for this conditional use permit, the applicant pulled or submitted or was issued a building permit to convert the 3-bedroom, 1-bath house to a 5-bedroom, 1.5-bath house. And it's difficult to make out all of the details on the floor plan up here, but I'll kind of try to point out these dark lines. And this, the left side of the screen, faces Lewis Street and is east, so up is north in this situation. Here's the front door. You walk in, and prior to the building permit issuance, there was a living room to your right. This was the living room, and there's a sunken family room to your left, where you go down just one step down into a sunken area that was a family room. And what the applicant has done is have made some modifications and renovations to the area to convert this family room into a bedroom, and this thick line here that you see that's a little darker than the rest is a wall that was put up around the family room to also convert the family room into a bedroom. So now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bedrooms on the main floor, and there is an existing bathroom. And the bathroom is a, I guess, a 4-fixture bathroom, if you want to look at it that way, where it has a double sink, a shower/tub combination, and a toilet. And so that would be the main floor bath. The 2-car garage was also modified to where a wall was put up closing in the overhead doors and converting this area here along with this area in between the garage into a living area. So this is the main structure that was built in 1955. This is the detached garage that was constructed in 1959, and at some point this 11 by 22 foot room was constructed to attach the two to basically make one unified unit, and they have converted the 2-car garage into a living area. So that was the reconstruction work that was done on the main floor. In the basement, the walls were removed to make an open area. There was a wall here when you came down the stairs that separated these 2 spaces. This wall was removed, so you have one large open area. A wall was constructed around the utility/furnace room, and then an egress window in this corner was created and installed. So those are the modifications structurally that were done to the unit. Additionally, in addition to the building renovations, there was also a sprinkler unit that was put in for fire suppression purposes. So since this time, the building has been renovated to have an operation of emergency care for 8 children. And what we're looking at today in the nature of our request is to look and see if that number could be increased to 10 with this for this site, or if 10 is beyond the limit of what is reasonable for a single-family neighborhood. So that will be your role today, is to look to see if the 2 additional kids would be out of character and incompatible with the surrounding neighborhood. The first thing we want to look at is the zoning ordinance and what the zoning ordinance requirements are for conditional uses in the R1 district. And the R1 district is primarily designed to provide zoning for dwellings in a single-family capacity. The conditional uses that are listed include churches, group daycare homes, schools, and then group care facilities, which is what we're looking at here today. The R1 district requires that all conditional uses, with the exception of group daycare homes, have special bulk regulations, which bulk regulations are your square footages that are allowed, your maximum lot coverages, the minimum lot areas, your setbacks, things of that nature. And in your packet, there is a table that will help show the differences between the required bulk regulations for typical permitted uses, which we have here today, and then the required for conditional uses, which is being proposed, and then the existing conditions. Because this structure was unified with the detached garage being attached to the existing dwelling, the lot coverage of the property is 43.3% and is therefore pre-existing non-conforming. So even before we get into the conditional use permit, we have some non-conformities as to both setback and the maximum lot coverage. The biggest issue that staff has determined while we were analyzing and measuring all of the different bulk requirements in relation to the existing conditions on the site is that the minimum lot width for a conditional use permit is 100 feet, and currently we have 72.8 feet. So we're short there. And then the minimum lot area for a conditional use permit is 15,000 square feet. And even though this is a pretty decent sized lot at a little over 8,000, we are shy of the 15,000 square feet minimum. So the approval of the conditional use permit would require either bulk regulation variances for the minimum lot width requirements, minimum lot area requirements, setback requirements, and maximum lot coverages, or it couldn't be approved. So what that means is you've got a couple of options here, and we'll get into that a little bit later when we talk about alternative actions that you could have. But as we go through this, you want to think about this, is at the end when we deliberate our decision, because of the non-conforming nature to the conditional use requirements, we're going to either have to defer action until the Board of Zoning Appeals can hear a variance application, or there could be grounds, because it doesn't meet the strict requirements of the conditional use permit bulk regulations, that would be grounds of denying the application. So those are going to be two scenarios that you'll have to think about when we get to deliberating the decision of this conditional use request. In looking at the benefits, welfare, and convenience of the public, the Planning Commission must find that the conditional use permit in the proposed location will contribute to the welfare and convenience of the public. The applicant believes that the proposed conditional use will promote the welfare and convenience of the public and provide a benefit to the city of Salina and the surrounding area youth. And staff, in looking at this, agrees that an emergency care shelter for children between permanent housing would be a benefit to the community. And currently, they would be allowed to operate with 10 children at this facility. The question is, they'll be allowed to have 8 children at this facility. The question is that the limit, or should that be the limit, or should that limit be extended to 10? And so that's something that you'll have to deliberate on, is where should that limit be? 8 is the limit now. The applicant is seeking to have 10 children on this site. In looking at the impacts and injury, the applicant states that the proposed conditional use will not cause substantial injury to the value of the other properties in the neighborhood, and continues by stating that they have done some extensive renovations on the inside of the house, including the addition of a sprinkler system, which is an added benefit that most residences don't have. And staff believes that it's probably going to depend mainly on how well the operation and the home are managed as to what kind of impact it would have on the neighborhood. The applicant is correct, and we would agree that the added sprinkle system, fire suppression system, is an added benefit that is unique and of added value. And there's also an egress window that was added in the basement that adds to the safety of the property as well. Again, the question is primarily, is 8 the number on which we can live with, or should that number of children be expanded to have 10 children on site? Additionally, there have been some concerns from the neighboring properties, and their concerns range from the limited area of the property, not having a fenced-in yard that of any size that could be used for people to play in. There's no fenced-in yard at all. And so the question is, where are kids going to play? There is concern about adding traffic with that many residents in a single location, on a single property, in a single family dwelling unit. And there's also concern about property values and how that type of use will be perceived if they try to rent out their properties or try to sell their properties, that is the neighbors, if they were to rent out their properties or try to sell them, how potential tenants or potential buyers of the property would perceive being living in proximity to this type of use. In looking at the public utilities, the structure was designed and built as a single-family dwelling, and as such has all of the natural utility systems that a single-family dwelling would have. And even though it's not a single-family dwelling at the moment, it still is being used as a dwelling unit for children. And so the use from the outside won't have a perceivable change, and the utilities and the way the property is used are already set up to be adequate for that type of use. So staff doesn't have any real concerns with the existing utility system, with the exception of the restroom situation, where currently you've got the main full bath on the main floor that has the double wide or the double sinks and the tub shower combo and a toilet. The only other restroom is a half bath in the basement that has a sink and a toilet here. And so the question is one fully functional restroom adequate for 10 children and 2 staff members at one time? And so that's a real concern that staff has that we wanted to bring to your attention. In looking at the parking and traffic and access of the site, we talked about it a little bit earlier when we were going through the photographs, but there is a double wide driveway that connects off of Kerwin here that could have 2 parking stalls on it. And even though it's difficult to see because of the tree on the west side of the house, there is a driveway that's a single wide driveway that connects off of Lewis here. So they have 3 off-street parking spaces, and what staff has determined is if none of the children are going to have vehicles and none of them are going to be driving, then they would need to have 1 parking space for each of the 2 staff members, which would be 2 parking spaces, and then 1 for general loading and unloading and visitation. So the 3 we feel would be adequate for the proposed use. And with that, there are a list of alternatives there that you could consider. Staff has gone through, and if the commission decides that there are no negative impacts on the surrounding area, if the operation of the emergency care child center would be expanded from 8 to 10, we do have a list of conditions that could be entertained by you. One of the the questions, or a couple of the questions that we would have that we would like to hear from the applicant on are clarification about the children in the vehicles. Will any of them be driving? What is their freedom limits, meaning are there curfews? When are people coming and going? Are any of them going to have jobs? How do the operations deal with those types of rules, and what are those rules, those house rules that may be on the site there that staff would be enforcing? And then another question is, what is the reason from going from 8 to requesting 10? And is this a financial request? Is it something that they get more money from the state? Is it a situation where they simply have to turn children away at the moment because the need for 10 is greater than their 8 that they can currently provide as a service? And so those would be some of the questions that staff would have. And then because this is a request, a conditional use permit that could go either yes or no, in anticipation of that, staff did prepare 2 separate findings of fact where you could look at the list of findings for approval and you could adopt those or modify them if you wish, or you could look at the list of findings for denial and adopt those and or modify them to fit your needs if the determination is required that those be modified. So those are a couple of questions that we would have, and then those are the list of findings that staff would have, and with that we would take any questions from the commission.
So let me see if I understand this, Mr. Herr. If except for the bulk regulations, if they were at 8, would they not be before us today, or it'd be in the permitted use category?
No. Currently, what they are allowed to do today without coming to this commission is they could have their structure as it's pre-existing non-conforming, meaning that it doesn't meet the requirements for permitted use in the R1 district, but because it predates some of our rules, it is allowed to maintain its form in perpetuity as long as it remains a single-family residence. That's how this situation relates to the pre-existing nature of the bulk regulations. Now, in terms of the use, which is a separate issue, and having 8 children being cared for at the site, they currently function as a care facility, emergency care facility at the site now, and that's permitted. The trigger that brings this request to you is going from 8 to 10. So today they could have 8. Without this board, they're permitted to have 8. They cannot go beyond 8 without your permission.
Are there other pre-existing non-conforming examples in the neighborhood there?
That's a good question. I don't think that they would probably be to this nature, because a lot of the non-conforming, the reason this property is non-conforming to the degree that it is because you have a detached garage, which is not abnormal at all, that was constructed. The thing that is abnormal is you've got this breezeway that connects it. If this was detached and you didn't have this, it's not really a breezeway because it's too big for a breezeway, this room that connected the 2 structures, you would have a detached structure that would be regulated by the accessory structure bulk regulations, which are completely different than the principal bulk regulations, and you would have a much lesser lot coverage. So this addition that connected the detached garage and the principal structure is what's has caused this to be a pre-existing non-conforming property. And we don't know, there's nothing in our records as to when this addition was constructed.
There are a lot of rentals in the area?
There are some rentals in the area, but I didn't actually do a percentage, but in looking at the notification list, the list of names and addresses that we sent our letters out to within 250 feet of the area, a lot of them did appear to be owner occupied, but there were some rentals.
Any other questions for staff?
Do we have any, sorry, I know we like to keep it rolling, Todd. Do we have any information on, they own another facility that they operate. Do we have any management information? They're licensed, they're inspected. Do we know what the other facility's record is?
We don't know as far as when you say the record of how, I assume you're meaning how well they operated the property, or what do you mean by record?
Well, if you keep track of licensing reviews and inspections, that kind of thing. I just suppose it's comment from the tenant to tell us, and the neighborhood around the other facility to tell us what they think of the management of the other place.
The actual licensing and inspections and stuff dealing with the proposed use of those special kind of care facilities is done by the state of Kansas. We deal with them when they reach a conditional use permit level, when they are above and beyond what we can permit in a residential district, but we don't actually pass the initial inspection where we may go do a site visit and talk about it. We don't do annual inspections, and we aren't involved. So
I understand.
I can't answer a lot of...
I was just asking.
No, that's a good question, and it's a fair question.
I think this could go to the management, and how much confidence we have in how the applicant will perform operating.
And I believe that this facility is designed, and you're right, the applicant did have other facilities, but I believe that this facility is designed to replace the other facilities. That would be a question for the applicant. So I don't know that there are any other facilities at the moment, but this is a operation that the applicant has been doing for a number of years now, I believe.
I guess I can speak to that a little bit, just from the standpoint that we have some family care facilities that were located in the Eastview Estates addition off of Magnolia Road, and we had received complaints from that neighborhood about how several of those were being operated or managed, and we have not had similar complaints about the applicant's Hickory property or a previous location, which was on Roberts. So that usually the way we would be involved is if neighbors would call and have complaints about children being unsupervised or things of that nature going on, and we don't have any record of any of those concerns about the Hickory location or the Roberts location, which are other ones that we're aware of.
This facility seems to be, there, you hear it now? This facility seems to start to mirror a little bit a commercial facility. And then, so my question is, what guidelines are in place governing the number of restrooms, the amount of bedrooms, you lay out a facility, and et cetera? Because that becomes an issue here, and who determines that, other than we sit here and make a guess as to what's right?
Under the, currently with the number of residents who are there and the design and construction of the dwelling from the standpoint of code enforcement, it's still governed by the International Residential Code, and it's also, as long as there are 12 or fewer residents, then the fire code's going to treat it as a residential facility.
Thank you.
John?
In the, I guess it's one of these pages, there's a description of it talks about the heat and air in the garage that's been converted. Covers up to approximately 760 square foot. Does that satisfy the garage and the breezeway? Is there heat and air in the breezeway? I mean, is the heat and air going to be enough for the house and the breezeway both? Has that been looked at to whether it satisfies all that?
I honestly don't know the answer to that. I do know that the breezeway, if you want to call it that, the room that connects the two structures, there is a door from the kitchen that goes into the area in between, and then there's an opening here, but I don't believe there's a door at the other end of the breezeway. So, but that's something we can get with our building services staff to determine if we need to, but that's not something that planning would make a determination on.
Any other questions before we hear from the applicant? Hearing none, would the applicant like to speak? Yeah, please come to the podium. Please enter your name and your address so we can enter it into the record.
Hi, my name is Sue Jones. My address is 1419 Lewis Avenue, and my purpose today is to fulfill the request for the conditional use permit of that address.
Any questions for the applicant?
What's the age range of the children at the facility?
I am licensed through the state of Kansas for the age range of 0 through 18. So I have the opportunity to work within that range with any way I can. And what I do within that environment is that I try to keep it to an appropriate where that group is within the same age group. As of right now, we're dealing with the 12 and 8 years old in that area. So I am licensed to go broader, but I try to stay within a certain age group.
How many car drivers you got?
Our staff members, one of their requirements is that they must be able to drive. As far as the youth themselves, they do not drive at all. No.
How much turnover is there in the kids that are living with you? Is there?
The purpose of an
Typical?
emergency shelter is that we provide temporary care. A normal stay is usually a 30 to 45-day stay, but we have found that to be much longer. Our sole purpose is to be that liaison between the court system and that child being placed in an extended care within your foster care or something like that. So as far as the exact amount of stay, it just depends on each child.
So have you had some stay a year?
I have had one that have stayed a year. Yes, I have.
And you have to prepare food for them and take, just like they move into your house?
Correct, correct. This is a family unit, and we treat them as we are one happy family.
I question the ability to be able to take care
So-
of people feeding them, that sort of thing.
Yes.
So I had a question. So your referrals are through what agency primarily? Are there different agencies? Is it a single agency?
Yes, our service agencies are directly through the St. Francis Community Services and also KVC. We also deal directly with the police station here with the kids in police protection custody.
Okay.
So those are our three main service areas.
Okay.
Dustin?
Yeah, Sue, if you would like to expand upon some of the house rules concerning the children's freedom, their curfews, whatever special rules that you may have. And then also, it's my understanding that this facility, unlike some of your previous ones, is going to be a mixed sex. Is that true?
We are licensed co-ed, but as I have mentioned, I work within stay within a like group. So I do not have the co-ed. I have experienced that, but I have found that that's not what I prefer. So I stay within the same-sex area right now. And then you also mentioned about the kids' curfew and...
Curfew, any house rules,
Okay.
operation procedures?
Okay. We are a 24-hour supervised facility. We have to supervise the kids no matter where they're at, inside, outside, or wherever they might be. So as far as curfews, as long as they're in the direction of our staff, they're not to go out by themselves or anything of such like that. As far as employment, I did hear you mention that. The kids that we have, depending on their age, they do not go outside of the home to do employment as well. So they are within our vicinity at all times because, like I said, we are a 24-hour supervised facility.
So one of the concerns that I hear being voiced, and I wonder about if they are supervised at all times, if there's no fence to the house, is there opportunity for fresh air on a regular basis, and how is that done?
Well, we do a lot of our activities as far as if there's going to be an extended period of time outside. We do go away from the facility. As far as the address over on Lewis, we have thought about a fence just to give the kids an opportunity if they need to go out for immediate air or something like that. So until that time period does come, we will be considering a fence.
Do you take them to a park or something
Yes, we have all kind of activities that we offer for the kids. The park is one that we do regularly. Library, the Y, all sorts. We do have the kids out quite a bit at different activities.
Are they enrolled in school?
Yes, education is a major criteria. And as I say, we stay within the normalcy of the kids. So we have them in school. We correlate a lot with our mental health services here. We do the medical services for them as well.
And what was the occasion for seeing the need to expand to 10 children?
The reason why we are considering the expansion of 10 kids, a lot of it has to do with just looking at making sure the overall environment, the comfortable of the overall environment with 2 staff there. I know the state only requires 1 to 7. Their ratio is 1 to 7. So with us going from 8, that will allow me to have this 2 staff there anyhow. And so I thought, well, the additional 2 wouldn't make that greater of a difference, and it would only be to our advantage as far as the protection of the kids even more so. So it's more of a safety concern. And then I also look at the fact that we are declining kids quite often, locally especially, and within the surrounding areas. We are declining kids because of lack of space.
Are these kids adjudicated to you by the state? I mean, have they had some problem with the law in getting placed, or is it a function of their family not being functional?
The majority of the kids that we have, especially the age I have now, is due to the family dysfunction.
You answered my question, I believe, but I want to clarify. You're probably at 8 because you say you lack space for this right now. You're at 8 all the time, and basically, and you'll, if you go to 10, likely you'll have 10 most of the time. Would that be correct?
Correct. I am so sure we will.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Can you go through, if you did have a problem with a child, could you go down the steps of it? Do you have the, I guess I'll give you an example. If there was one who didn't stay inside the house,
Mm-hmm.
went out, causing problems, police were called,
Mm-hmm.
I'm assuming. If that continued to happen, if I was a neighbor in there, I'm sure we got other neighbors and we received some information from neighbors that are there, what steps do you have in place, or what are you allowed or not allowed to do? Can you terminate any of the children that are in there with you? Do you have to keep them for a certain amount of time until they're to another case, or what do you have, control do you have over that child?
We have lots of control in that. We can terminate a child at any time when we feel that they do not fit within our environment. With the experience and knowledge that we have had working with these children, we have allowed ourselves to be able to confine them when they are at a dysfunctional state. We do offer them at the facility we have right now. They are able to go like in the garage area or in the backyard area, places like that, if they're needed to be outside. And so that would be another advantage to us having another staff in there at all times, because they can be with them if they needed to cool down outside. Police enforcement are involved with us at all times. If it comes to the point to where our kids have even left the yardage or anything of such, we immediately call the law. So we have not had any experience as far as any of the kids going to any of the neighbors and doing any destruction there, disturbing the neighbors or anything of such as that. We haven't had any problems thus far.
How many years have you been doing this?
It would be 2 years in July 16th to be exact.
So I want to make sure that I understand what you're saying. And so you may well have said that. I just want to repeat so I have clearly. So if I get you right, having 10 kids there means that you have sufficient resources to have 2 people hired at all times.
At all times.
Rather than 1 occasionally and 2 occasionally. Am I getting that right?
Correct.
So with the 2 at all times, that gives you greater security overall.
Correct.
I'm understanding that right?
Correct.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And I know that it was mentioned, I'm just wanting to add, that Roberts Streets, Roberts was not of our address. We just have the Hickory address.
Okay. Any other questions for the applicant?
I have a question of restroom facilities. That, to me, doesn't seem real adequate. I mean, you one down the basement and little kids. I would think you'd be pretty active. I think it'd be a problem. I kind of question that.
Correct. We do have the full bathroom, as was mentioned, upstairs, and we do have downstairs just the toilet and sink at this particular time. It is in consideration that we are getting a shower placed in downstairs as well.
Ms. Gray, are you comfortable with the staff's recommendations? One of those being to go to ask for a variance on the size of the lot?
Oh, you said Ms. Gray.
Yeah, Ms.
sorry.
Jones.
Oh, I thought you said, okay. I'm sorry, can you ask that again?
This staff recommended 5 conditions if we approve this, and one of them's the conditional use permit is contingent on the Board of Zoning Appeals approving a lot variance. Are you okay with the conditions that the staff have recommended to us? Have you read those?
As far as size of the lot and all, when we initially approached this, I became aware of this last week of the zoning size. I am perfectly, as I have stated, fine as far as the size itself. Again, because the kids are not, that is not their area where they would be outside for an extended period of time. I'm very satisfied with the area that we do have in the front on the Kerwin Street side. I'm very comfortable with that. And then, as I have noted as well, in the future, we do plan to get a fence, so that would even be more of a benefit as well.
But if the Board of Zoning Appeals doesn't approve the lot variance, then you won't have your permit if our approval today is conditional on that.
Correct.
gotta go to
With
another
me being
board
aware,
and-
yeah, with me just being made aware of that,
Well,
it would be hard, but
how about I go through and read these? I didn't really go into much detail in my report about these potential
Might be
conditions of approval, but I'll go through them just so everybody has an understanding of the 5 that we're talking about here. So, condition number 1 is that no more than 10 children ages 0 to 18 may reside on the premises at any one time. Number 2 is that a minimum of 3 off-street parking spaces for staff members and guests shall be provided. The area for this parking must be paved. None of the children shall have driving privileges. Number 3, the applicant shall add an additional tub or shower to provide at least 2 tubs or showers on the premises as required by the International Building Code. Number 4, development and use of the property and operation of the care facility shall substantially conform to the plans on file with the Planning Department. And number 5, and this is what Commissioner Ryan was speaking of, the conditional use permit is contingent and shall not take effect until and unless the Salina Board of Zoning Appeals approves a minimum lot with variance of 100 feet to 75 feet or 72 feet and a minimum lot size variance from 15,000 square feet to 8,000 square feet. If these variances are not approved, the applicant shall be limited to operating a family care facility with no more than 8 residents at this location. What the applicant is saying is staff first discovered this when we were doing our analysis and quantifying the lot size and comparing what the existing conditions are to the required bulk regulations in the zoning district for the conditional use permit. And so what we did is we called the applicant and we talked about it, and this was on Friday. So this is pretty new to her. So that's what she's saying. And just for you, Ms. Jones, to understand what Commissioner Ryan is saying is the condition as it's written in here, if the commission were to approve your conditional use permit request with these 5 conditions of approval, then their approval would be contingent on going to the Board of Zoning Appeals and getting the requested variances approved by them. So then it kind of puts the ball in their court, not necessarily how the property would be used, but whether or not the variances for this type of conditional use permit should be warranted.
And Mr. Herr, I just might add to that, that goes back to my question asking about whether there's pre-existing non-conforming uses otherwise in the neighborhood.
Nothing to this magnitude, certainly, because the trigger that really causes the major non-conforming nature of this property is the conditional use permit. For single-family uses, Most of the properties would qualify because they all have 6,000 square feet or more, which is a minimum lot area for a single-family dwelling in the R1 district. There may be some that don't have all of the setback requirements, but it would be pretty minimal. I don't think there's any major nonconformities.
I think what we would like to point out or emphasize is that since the amendments took place on family care and group care facilities, we have never had a group care facility proposed in a dwelling. And so when you are dealing with things like daycare in a dwelling or just a dwelling, the 6,000 square foot lot size seems pretty reasonable. At your last meeting, you were dealing with a preschool, which was not in a dwelling. It was in a institutional type building, and it was a conditional use, and the requirement was that that conditional use have 15,000 square feet of lot area. And we do have a few group care facilities in town. There's one on Albert across from the former Dillon store, which is an OCCK group care facility, and it has 15,000 square foot lot, but it is not a dwelling. And so we believe that the findings that you might make in support of approval of this application would be the same type of findings that the Board of Zoning Appeals might make in terms of the lot size requirement. The purpose for the 15,000 square foot is that you have conditional uses like schools and churches and parks in residential neighborhoods where you might want to have a larger lot size for those types of conditional uses, whereas this is a dwelling and an 8,000 square foot lot. In most circumstances, if you look around this neighborhood, an 8,000 square foot lot is probably slightly larger than the lots surrounding it. So as we refer you to look at the findings of fact related to approval and findings of fact related to potential denial, what we're saying here is that this property was designed, built, and will appear and function as a dwelling, and that is different than other conditional uses like churches and schools and things. And so that distinction, being a dwelling, could justify approval of a lot size variance. Because what we would do with the Board of Zoning Appeals is we would do a circular sweep around here and say, here's all the lot sizes around this property, and this is not out of line. As to the non-conforming question, we have a lot of neighborhoods that were developed in the 50s and early 60s, particularly on corner lots where at one time you could build on one corner as close to 10 feet to the street. So if you go up and down Lewis, you're going to find a lot of places where homes are set back only 10 feet on a corner lot, so the nonconformities on this lot are not unusual in terms of the setback.
One more staff question, if I may. In the big picture of approval, does the city commission itself have to, if we approve this and if BZA approves it, does the city commission also have to act and approve these?
No, your action would be final contingent on the Board of Zoning Appeals granting the lot size variance.
On the other hand, if we denied the application, the applicant could
If you were to
appeal
vote
the
to
city
deny
commission.
it, the applicant could appeal your decision to the city commission.
Any other questions for the applicant and/or staff while the applicant is at the podium? Thank you. We may ask you to step back up if there's additional questions on there.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I would remind everybody this is a public hearing and would invite you to the podium to speak for it or against it. Please remember 3 to 5 minutes, or 5 minutes, I suppose, on there, and try to keep the same things, not repeating on there would be great. And if Mrs. Jones needs to come back up, then she could. So, anybody with public hearing? Name and address.
Pardon?
Name and address for the
My name is
record.
Von Minio. My home address is 851D Fairdale in Salina. I sent this letter to Dustin here. I'm not smart enough to do it on my own without reading here, so first of all, I respect people willing to help children in this type of situation. It is a good cause, and hopefully any children involved will eventually find a permanent, loving home. I feel this location is not desirable both for the children and the occupants of a single-family homes in the area. The house is relatively small for this many occupants. Also, kids need a place to play, make noise, and just be kids. There could also be some behavioral problems, with next-door occupants being the most vulnerable. My two rentals at 911 East Kerwin and 917 East Kerwin are directly adjacent to the requested group facility at 1419 Lewis. My property is just a few feet away from the backyard and potential play area for the kids. This backyard potential play area is also the driveway and garage for people coming and going. I have an elderly tenant and two other tenants who enjoy this location for its peace and tranquility. I would hate to find a situation where complaints would have to be filed, but I would do so to maintain peace and tranquility for my tenants. A separate playground facility and a multifamily or commercial location for this venture would be so much less intrusive and more desirable. The excessive amount of tenants in a single-family house causing potential commotion is an awkward and unfair situation for all parties. I have worked hard to acquire my rentals there, and I feel this situation would adversely affect the value of my properties as lease units or units for sale. Respectfully submitted, Von Minio. And however it turns out, I will be the best neighbor I can be to sue. So,
Thank you.
You'll also find in your packet another letter there that had dual signatures on it from some of the neighbors that we wanted to add in there for you to look at.
Again, it is a public hearing. The podium is still open if you'd like to express your concerns for the commission before it takes action.
I'm Melissa Saalfeld, 921 East Kerwin. I'm just 3 houses away. I feel the exact same position that Stephen Sherrybox and Lois Macbeth have. So,
Great. Thank you. Any others at this time before we close the public hearing? Seeing none, we will close the public hearing at this time, bring it back to commission for additional discussion and/or action.
Todd, may I ask a question of staff, if I may? Just help me. I've been the one that's harped on precedents since I've been on, setting precedents when basically we're almost bordering on putting a commercial venture in a residential area is what's happening. Tell me again, where's something similar like this? Are there other similar situations in Salina that have been approved in the past?
There are a number of these that have been approved in the past, but the reason you don't hear about them is that they're limited to 8 residents or fewer.
Okay.
And the only reason we're here today is because Ms. Jones desires to have more than 8. The other way to look at it from the standpoint is we essentially do the same thing with daycare. If you have licensed daycare and you have a minimal number of children, you as a planning commission will never hear about it. If somebody wants to do group daycare, which would allow them to have up to 12 children in an occupied dwelling, then that does require a conditional use permit and a neighbor. So there's 2 ways to look at it in terms of, again, in terms of the preschool, we discussed at the last meeting that is an institutional type use like churches and elementary schools. In this case, you have to look at it also from the standpoint, if you are driving by on the street on Kerwin or Lewis, are you going to be able to tell driving by that this is anything other than a single family dwelling? And so from that standpoint, it is a residential facility, and the purpose we are here to discuss today is whether going from 8 to 10 would push it into a different category in terms of the impact it would have or noticeable impact it would have on the neighbors. And so we have laid out essentially two alternate sets of findings, and the findings are pretty much identical for 5, 6, and 7. It makes no difference, but it's primarily factors 1 through 4, and the question is whether you've heard anything here today that would lead you to believe that having 10 children here and 2 staff would have a significantly noticeable impact over and above having 8 children and 2 staff.
Any other discussion?
And I'm trying to understand this, we don't have any regulations for a family care home of more than 1 staff, is that correct? For up to 8 children, up to 7, she said, is that correct? She has 8 children, she have to have 2? I mean, I don't...
I'm not sure that I fully understand the question, but the trigger for the second staff member is, I believe, and Ms. Jones can speak to this, is once you go above 7, so once they have that 8th, that's what triggers the second staff member. So she's got 2 options. You know, she could stick with what she has. If you were to deny her request, she could stick with what she has, have 8 children and 2 staff members, or she could drop it down and have 1 staff member, I believe, are her options. I don't know if that's what you're getting
Or
at.
7 children and one staff member.
Mhm.
We already have 8 at this point, so we already have 2 staff members.
And one of the most important words in the definitions that we've laid out for you is the term licensed. And Ms. Jones is a licensed provider, and she has to adhere to all the SRS and other guidelines as to how she manages and provides for the children in her care in order to maintain her status as a licensed provider. So that a lot of the things that you see in terms of ratios or staffing is covered by her license and not so much by zoning.
So, Ms. Jones, I have a question directly for you. So when you have a capacity of up to 8, when you have 7, do you then regularly have 1 staff member there, and when you then reach the 8th child, do you have 2? How do you handle it? Or do you have 2 staff members at times when you have 7 or fewer?
And may I interrupt
How do you handle that practically?
Before you answer that, could you step to the podium, please? There are people watching on
Yes,
TV who...
Right. I should have said that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
According to the state regulations, the ratio of staff and youth is 7 youth to 1. When I go to the factor past 7 youth, I do have to have 2 staff.
Do you have 2 staff at times when you have 7 or fewer?
I am not currently operating in that range, but once I get there, I will have to.
Okay, I sort of
would have
gathered by
1.
the amount of demand you suggested that regularly you are at 8.
Yes, yeah, I would like to meet the demand that I'm constantly getting, and once I'm able to meet that, I will have to have 2 staff if I go over 7 kids.
Okay.
Yeah, so once I meet...
What percentage of time do you have over 7 kids now, roughly, in a given 2-month period, for example?
Right now, my operation is 6 kids.
Okay.
Yeah, with my address over on Hickory is 6. Lewis is allowing me to increase within that range where I can go to 7 or more kids. Again, when I hit 7 kids over at Lewis, I will have to have 1 staff. But when I go to 8, I would have to have 2 staff. And my request is to have 10 kids, which I will have the 2 staff there anyhow.
How many currently live at Lewis right now?
Currently, there is 6 youth at Lewis.
And how many at Hickory? Or is that the address?
I mean, at Lewis, I'm sorry, there's none at Lewis. Lewis is not
I might be able to
open
add
yet.
some clarification here, because I'm seeing some confusing looks.
I thought this was
I'm
already like
confused.
going and 8 live there already, or 7.
This is very close to up and operational. There are a few things left from the building permit that was pulled in October. So this is where she's wanting to move her operations to. Currently, she's at Hickory. Hickory is a much smaller facility. It's a 3-bedroom facility. Is that correct, Sue?
Correct.
And so I think that's where you're going to find some of your differences. The Hickory facility cannot physically facilitate as many people as this can, being a much larger unit. With the main floor and the basement combined, this particular building structure has over 5,000 square feet in it. So it's quite a bit larger than their current facility. So hopefully that clears it up.
So she could get the, excuse me, I'm sorry, she could get the building permit to do the work that's been done here under the auspices of 8 or fewer.
And she has.
And she has.
And
And
they're,
that's-
they're
that didn't have
very,
to come anywhere.
They're very near to being completely done with
But
that.
now we're just being asked to allow 10
Yes.
versus 8 when you move
Well,
in.
and I don't mean to sound crass or anything like that, but it doesn't take a rocket scientist to understand. If you need to employ one person for 7, and the minute you get 8, you need to employ 2, come on, folks. I mean, I'm not trying to make kids collateral here, but any business person's going to understand you want to have as many people as you can in order to make it, yeah, you know, make it worth your time. So that's not that doesn't surprise me at all here. That if you're going to have 8 and you have to have 2, I understand that. I don't know that I agree with it. I don't know that I particularly like it, but I understand exactly why we're doing that. That's just not hard to figure out.
And the comment I'd like to add to that is with 2, I think that's a better situation than with 1 in the
Correct.
facility. So
Correct. Much better.
to me, I think it comes down to a management issue
Correct.
to me, and sorry I called you Gray, Ms. Jones.
You're okay. You're okay.
Yeah, it's just whether we trust you to do this and that.
Correct.
Dean, if you will, under the permit that we may be granting here, if a licensed provider such as Mrs. Jones no longer is involved, could anyone else can't step in there and take over this operation? The license, I mean, the condition we're allowing is dependent upon the licensed personnel being there. In other words, I'm not licensed to do that. Could I buy the house and operate the facility? Under
If you
the
were
permits
doing
we're
it
granting?
under a license by the state of Kansas.
Okay, so the condition of use of this is dependent on it being operated by a licensed individual, licensed
It
under the
has
state
to
of
have a
Kansas.
licensed provider
Okay, all right, thank you.
by definition.
I'm going to throw one other thing in there just as a perspective in my standpoint. I come from a family of 10. I won't tell you the size of house we grew up in and the number of bathrooms we had. I think all of those things for when you're talking about families is immaterial. A family of 10 could buy this house and move in there without doing any of the renovations that Miss Jones has done, and none of you would have a say-so regarding the fence, regarding whether or not kids were screaming and hollering all night long, whether or not there were 2 teenage boys who were decided to take an engine out of a car to put another one in, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I think we need to be real conscious of that, you know, the number of children, the number of in a home as a family. I don't want us to get mixed up in whether or not there's enough room to raise 10 kids. I think there's enough room to raise 10 kids, but should we allow a business in a residential area or a business of 10 as opposed to a business of 8? And I don't have an answer yet, but I just want to give that as a perspective. I get a little concerned when we say, well, there's going to be kids out there playing and hollering and running around. Well, the box of kids, when there were 8 of us running around, 5 boys in a row, less than a year apart, there was some hollering and screaming, and we did not have a fence.
Tells us a lot about you,
We'd have
Jerry.
taken it down.
Well, without necessarily weighing in on any side of that, at the same time, visualizing 12 individuals in a house, even a relatively large one, and with a smaller lot than is required, makes me wonder, and I think your point is well taken, that the trust and faith we put in that operation is, in this case, Ms. Jones, with you, and you may well have a track record. We have no way, I have no way of knowing that here. Another licensed operator could come in and could have a much more chaotic atmosphere around the house. I have a little bit of difficulty with not getting out as much. I have a lot of mixed feelings about it. But a key thing for me is that the Board of Zoning Appeals, before anything happens, has to approve this lot variance. That lot is not going to increase in size. It is what it is. And I'm inclined to say, I'd like to hear from the Board of Zoning Appeals, is this variance going to be granted? And then weigh the considerable issues that we're weighing right now. At the same time, I don't want to go put you and everybody else to a long hearing again. So it's running through my mind.
I appreciate your comments. As a point of clarification, though, let's say that this were postponed to the Board of Zoning Appeals and the 60 days or so that it took for that to clear, Ms. Jones, if she had all the other pieces in place, could begin operating the facility with 8 in there as soon as those pieces are in place,
Right.
irregardless of how long it takes. I think that's helpful for all of us to think about, too.
Right.
That is correct. Our thinking on that and why doing the conditional use permit first or making it contingent is that if there is no action or there's no contemplation that there will be a conditional use permit, it's kind of a wasted effort. There's absolutely no reason to go to the Board of Zoning Appeals for a lot size variance because absent the use of the property being a conditional use, there's no reason to apply for a variance. So the reason that it came to you first is that if you were to vote to approve this, then we would know that we had a reason to seek lot width and lot size variances. If you were to vote to turn it down, then there would be no reason to pursue any kind of lot size variance at all. So in terms of lining up the order of things, we felt it was better to know whether there was support for a conditional use permit to go to 10, then that could be reported as the reason for the application for the lot size variance. If you were to wait and defer your decision till later, and then you chose not to support it, then her efforts to go to the Board of Zoning Appeals were wasted.
Any other questions for the applicant while she's up? Thank you again. Any other questions for staff and/or discussion? If seeing none, the chair will entertain some sort of a motion and see if we can put something together.
I can, so we didn't offer it to you here. It's been done in limited cases. You do have the authority to limit a conditional use permit to a particular applicant or operator. So you do have the authority to add a 6th condition if it was of any benefit, that the conditional use permit would be applicable to the applicant's operation only, and if she ceased operating it as a licensed emergency shelter for children, then the conditional use permit would essentially expire, which basically means it's not transferable to another operator. That is an option that you have to make it a non-transferable conditional use permit.
So who does a landowner like Mr. Mignot complain to? The police department or the state of Kansas? I mean, what's his process if he finds that there's things going on that he can prove that he doesn't like? And
my experience, it usually comes to planning staff first.
So it would come back to us and we would make the decision, or back to you guys, and you guys would make the decision as to whether they keep their license? I mean, yeah, it goes to the state, doesn't it?
We have information. We've already been in contact with the people involved in licensing this facility, the state, and if we got complaints, we would be in contact with them, and we would probably discuss it jointly.
I just wanted to help them through the process, because that's their next question is, if we pass this and something goes on and there's complaints and they don't know who to go to, I just wanted to clarify that for them.
Right. The complaints have generally come to the planning staff, and we have, before we address them, we have done it in consultation with the appropriate staff member at Kansas SRS, who would be the one that would license. Again, in times past, they used to license facilities. Now they license the providers. And if a provider does not have a good track record, then the providers don't get their license renewed.
My opinion on it, although Carl says I should never talk, but I always have to give my opinion on it. So, as Vaughn said to Mrs. Jones, commend anybody who takes on doing this. I think it's a courageous thing, and I think it's a great thing, something that would be very difficult for me to do, but it fits you well, and you're able to do that. I would like to have a kind of a record of how has this gone. I mean, rather than us going from, I mean, that shed a whole new light on me, knowing that we're coming now from Hickory over to Lewis. That, is there a track record? You know, could this be tabled for 120 days or 90 days or something that I would feel a lot more supporting it for the community, for the neighborhood, going, okay, this is what we've been doing for 90, 120 days. What's the track record of 120 days to know if we want to take it up to 2 more or if it's available to do 2 more? If we come back, you know, if we were able to come back and say it's been perfect and nothing's been there and, wow, these are great neighbors and we think we could handle the 2 so that there would be another person that's there. Easier for me to make a decision, but it's very difficult for me to make a decision with 0 track record and telling the people in the neighborhood that we just think it's okay to put 10 in there. I'm just speaking to myself. It's okay to put 10 in there when we don't even know what 8's going to do, or 7. And that's where I'm at. I mean, it's very, just like Jerry's saying, Mr. Box, it's tough for me to figure it out. It's such a great cause that I also don't want to keep two other kids who could go into something like that being done. So that's kind of where I'm at. I don't really know what motion at this point I could support or deny. I just think there needs to be a little bit more of a track record from 8 to 10. But I will open that up if you would like to approach it, yes.
As I have stated, I have been in this service over a year. It'll be a year, July 16th. And to consider a track record, KDHE is one that you can contact. I have had no problem. Actually, they come out quite often to do their surveys and so on and so forth, and we have had no problems. The current property over on Hickory, the neighbors there have had no problems with us. Actually, they have been very supportive with playing with the kids and so on and so forth. Law enforcement, the law enforcement here, they actually call on me first before they call the other facilities in time when they're in need of help. So there's references there that you all can contact, because to continue to prolong this, I have to be approved here by the city, and then I also, once my license is approved with you all, I have to go through KDHE and have my license approved through them as well. So this caused a greater extension on me being to the completion of what I am needed to actually function at the fullness that I am capable of doing. So again, KDHE is one person that you can contact. Actually, the representative I have there is Janice Burdick. She works with me continually all the time. Your local law enforcement is one as well. So those are 2 main ones that you can speak with. And then I do a lot with Central Kansas Mental Health as well. They haven't actually been within my environment, but they are familiar with us as well. So those are some references for you.
Thank you.
Can I get a little bit of clarification, and maybe this has been implicit, but will it be your intent then that the Hickory property will be supplanted, you'll sell it, or get rid of it, and operate only out of the Lewis?
I'm not saying that right now. I'm not saying that right.
Do you think you may operate both?
Possibly, yes.
I see.
Possibly.
You're keeping your options open in that
Yes.
respect?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes.
So Commissioner Welsh, are you suggesting that we postpone this for a reference check, or?
I was just giving my opinion. I'm open for any motion or, again, more discussion that the commission wants to take.
I have real mixed feelings about this also. Back in my earlier life, when I was involved in various kinds of housing, I was involved in the actual state law that made group homes, residential group homes of 8 units possible in any residential area across the state. And I was, we've mentioned the OCCK projects. I was acting as the developer back in 82, 83 in building the 3 OCCK units that are here in town for developmentally disabled. There was lots of controversy, and at that time the focus was mostly developmentally disabled, but all these other kinds of group homes were brought into the mix later as a result of the action that was taken roughly 30 years ago. So there is a 30-year track record of 8-unit group homes. that have been reasonably successful, even though they were widely opposed 30 years ago. Just the whole concept was opposed. Now we're looking at bigger, and I always am feel reluctant about whether bigger is always better. I know that's anti-American because we've done so many things in our society where we think it has to be bigger to be better, and that if it is bigger, it is automatically better. So I have a real mixed emotions about trying to go forward for, it's only a 25% increase. The financial situations over that 30 years, I'm sure, has changed, and maybe that's a big part of the problem from your aspect. I'm just kind of supposing. But I'm really troubled with the idea, and the other kind of mixed emotion that we have here. If we say, okay, this is a conditional use permit for 10, all of a sudden the exact same building has to jump through more governmental hoops because you have to go back to the BZA and get it approved. Whereas if you stay at 8 units and then you're in, the house doesn't have to be approved by BZA. You don't have to go through any other governmental reviews except the monitoring that you have in your operation. So in many respects, to me, it's hard to see where it's of value in the big picture to go to 10 units, to 10 residents from 8. It's just, yeah. On the other side, I see the number of dysfunctional families seems to be on the increase, and the demand is there. So it's a really tough situation.
So can I ask an additional clarifying question? You were talking about relicensure through the KDHE, correct? And that's for this facility?
Correct.
Okay, so if you get relicensure through KDHE for this facility at Lewis and Kerwin, do you then have to reapply for a new license if it expands to 10?
I will have to do that, yes. Yes, which is why I am asking that if we can go ahead and consider that factor, because that is another time frame that I would have to wait upon.
And how much additional financial and time burden is that for you?
The finance, I think it's, I want to say 70 to relicense each time I go through a license.
Okay.
And I think to increase is going to be as well.
And time-wise?
Time-wise, I think a normal standard for KDHE is a 90-day time period.
Okay, so
Yeah.
if you went ahead and did this then for 8, you'd have a 90-day period before you could come back as a 10-child licensed home.
If I can say, with the situation that I am now, KDHE is currently awaiting for the go-ahead. And so things have been set in place to where my license and so on and so forth can be completed within a shorter time because I had started on that previously, that area previously.
And this application is for 10?
Yeah, for the application, yeah. So they're just waiting on the go-ahead with that number there. If it comes to the point to where it is finalized to where I can only reach 8, then I will have to start all over again, and that's where that 30 to 90-day plan will come in at, with me having to start all over again.
But you can't operate with 8 during that time?
Once, if they give me an approval, KDHE is the main one that's going to approve me of how many kids I can have as well.
Right.
So, and we are so focused on that number of 8 to 10. 10 is a very big number, but it's not really big. You know, we're talking about a service of kids that are in need. Other options that these kids would have, as I have stated, we deal a lot with local kids. So the other option would be that they would have to go elsewhere. And so my thing is to open up myself even wider for those. The concern about kids being kids, they're going to do that. Even in the neighborhood of Lewis as of now, we have seen kids that are out in the street. Behind us on Kerwin, no, I'm Lewis, I'm sorry. There are college students that are there. They're not quiet, but they're college students. I have another house on the other side of me that it appears to be college students as well. So as far as the noise and the combustion, you would not have to worry about the extremes of that when I am managing something. I take pride in my service, so that's not anything that you all would have to worry about. You know, but I do allow my kids to be kids, and as you see, they're quiet right now. So we don't have to worry about too much out of the play for our kids.
You're to be congratulated. My daughter has 5 kids, and the 18-year-old triplets are perfect. And I can assure you they're anything but quiet.
You know, I'm inclined to move this along a little bit. I mean, I see that she could operate with 8 without us being here at all. We got an opportunity to serve a couple more kids that probably could use the help.
More is not that
And
much.
in doing that, we also allow you and require you basically to have 2 supervisors at all time, which I see as a positive for the kids as well as for the neighbors. And additionally, we can put some conditions on this application that maybe makes the situation a little better for kids, for you, and for the community. And I also like adding the 6th one, if the commission would be willing, that says it's conditional on you operating it. That gives us that assurance. If it doesn't work for you and you have to step away from it, we're going to be able to revisit this and say what happened and why didn't it work, and maybe approve it again or not approve it again, but this commission, whoever's sitting here, could look at that again. So with that, I'm going to make a motion that we advance the application CU-14-2 with the 5 conditions as listed by staff, with the addition of a 6th condition, which requires the application to be contingent upon Mrs. Jones's operation of the facility under license from the state.
I like Mr. Kennedy's logic. I'll second it.
Not sure who beat to the second. I'll let you decide on that. So, you're going with Bernie?
I truly don't have any reason to deny it. I think I commend her for what she does, and I just think she's half nuts myself. I don't know where you come up with having the patience to do what you're doing.
Yeah.
So I commend you for that. That's all I need to say about that.
So I have a motion and a second on the table. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Deny? Hearing none, motion passes.
And I want to just say, Ms. Jones, Sue, you strike me as a very competent individual, and so I appreciate your presence and your answering the questions.
Either Dustin or I'll be contacting you about the Board of Zoning Appeals lot size request, and that will also be a public hearing in this room, and we'll try to get going on that as soon as possible.
Good luck.
We'll move this on to public hearing item number 3, review of proposed 2014 capital improvement program.
John, do
Dean?
you have that slide ready?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have the short version.
What
We've been requested for the short version of this, but you go ahead, Dean.
What we are here to talk about is that under the State Planning, Zoning, Enabling Act, each year when there's a capital improvement list of capital improvement projects, major projects for transportation or utilities, there's a requirement that the Planning Commission review that and make a finding or concur that those projects are consistent with the comprehensive plan. So what we've given you in your packet, I wanted to just go through these briefly, is that these were 2013 projects, and you're going to see a lot of repeats. The Bicentennial Center improvements were carried over to 2014. The flood control levee certifications carried over to 2014. Cloud and 9th Street intersection improvements carried over to 2014. Ms. Tasker's wastewater pump station out at Markley and Magnolia carried over to 2014. The Centennial Road paving out in the airport industrial area has been pushed back to 2018. Downtown lighting project is currently under construction. Gateway signage was listed and carried over. We have the hike and bike trail and the water line improvements. So a lot of the 2013 projects were pushed over into 2014, so this is what you are reviewing. So if you could keep scrolling, John. Project number 1 is in the easement acquisition stage. This is to construct a pump station and collection system for the area out at Markley and Magnolia. What that would involve is construction of a new lift station on the west side of Markley Road. There's a number of people in Valley View that are on septic systems. They would get off of septics and be able to tie into this lift station. Kelly Dunn has a number of lots in Magnolia Hills Estates that cannot be served by the current sewer system, and they would have to be served by this pump station. The vacant corners, particularly the one at the northeast corner below the First Covenant Church, that cannot be served. Currently, it would be able to be served by this pump station, and so that is moving forward. Wanted to call special attention to the increase in funding. And number 2, in terms of priorities, is the gateway signage at the entryway into Salina on North 9th Street. There's $350,000 allocated for gateway signage at that location. The Bicentennial Center improvements are going to touch about everything in that building, including the HVAC system, restrooms, the kitchen and catering improvements. All of those things will be involved. There are 2 sections of the levee, one south of State Street, one west of 9th Street, that have to be raised so the levee can be certified to provide 100-year protection. That will be done sometime this year. In May, we should see activity at Cloud and 9th. There's going to be a widening of 9th Street and a realigning of travel lanes. New to the list here is reconstruction of Iron Avenue between Front and Ohio Street, and that will include a pavement removal and replacement, some mill and in-lane, and some curb and gutter replacement. And then each year there are sections of the hike and bike trail that are added to. They try to do at least one section each year. And then we have a lot of old cast iron water pipelines throughout the city, and a significant portion of those will be replaced each year. But as you see, to make the full conversion, it would take about 28 years. So there's a lot of work to be done year by year incrementally. So if you concur that this 2014 project list serves the existing service area and the primary growth areas of the city, then it would be appropriate to make a motion to approve the attached resolution that's in your packet and endorse the proposed project list. In reviewing that list, you want to provide any comments to the City Commission about any particular projects you believe are especially important. Those would be entered into your minutes.
A few questions?
We have lots of money left over from last year that got rolled in 2014. That's what in the budget. That's what you're saying?
Yes.
Yeah.
Projects that weren't online or quite ready, so they got rolled over into 2014.
Why did they move, why did the Centennial Road paving get moved back so far?
I think partially because it's dependent on getting some state funding, which is not, and we're on a cycle with the state that we usually get one of those awarded about every 3 years, and I don't think the state money came through for that.
Is the gateway signage wayfaring in 2014, is that including what was rolled over from the prior year? There was 75,000 over there.
Yes, the 75,000 was not deemed to be adequate based on the type of size and design that we're looking at out there at 9th Street.
I have a statement and then a question, if you will. First of all, I'm supportive of the projects. I don't see any there that I have a hang-up with. I do have a concern with gateways. It's been a passion of mine since I've been on this commission to improve our entryways into Salina. I don't see signs as being an improvement to the entryways. I mean, not that they're bad. I just see that if you have a nice sign in front of a bunch of junk, it's not going to help people's opinion in the community much. So I hesitate to say I could support signage at the entryways. I'd rather see a lot of the poles taken down and underground cables put in. I'd like to see some nice lights put up. I'd like to see some of the properties that are not in good condition anymore addressed and dilapidated conditions being taken care of. That's what's going to attract people to Salina, not an expensive sign that's along the road somewhere. That's the piece I'd like to mention. I don't know if that money could be spent more appropriately in cleaning up an area and enhancing an area as far as the roads and the lights. Lights are a big factor in encouraging people to get off the interstate and come to your community. So I just wanted to mention that. But then the question is, the projects were moved from 13 over to 14. Is that largely because of funding had to be moved forward, or because staff time just wasn't available to get them all accomplished?
because of some of the design work and other things was not completed. And some of that would apply to, in the case of the southeast wastewater pump station, that's been designed for 3 or 4 years, but there are a lot of easements that have to be acquired to go through various pieces of property, and it's the easement acquisition that has slowed that up. There are some design and scope of work issues with the Bicentennial Center improvements, and I can't speak to the levy certification, but there was again right-of-way acquisition on a lot of these projects. If there is right-of-way or easements to be required, that is also a reason that projects get pushed back if the right-of-way or the easements have not all been acquired.
And some of this is kind of exciting because I'll be nearing my 100th birthday when the water lines are finished up.
That's right. Already started over by then.
Commissioner Kennedy,
kid to stay around.
if you, without naming specific ones, I guess if I'm driving through my head, I'm trying to pinpoint which one is most concerning to you. If I think about, without naming businesses or property owners in general, if I think about Crawford and I-35, the removal of the gas station, the subway going up, and then I think of Magnolia, and I think of Waterwell. So is it specifically one entranceway that?
9th and I-70.
9th and I-70.
Without a doubt, it just is not attractive, and I think it has the most potential to benefit our community of any entryway right now because of the volume of traffic on I-70.
Right.
So if Dean was to put that in his notes of the minutes, specifically 9th and I-70, looking at that and allocating more money to not necessarily a bigger sign.
No,
Would
not
be-
a sign, or no sign at all. I'm okay with no sign at all, just an improvement to the area.
Sure.
And I'll be specific when they put in the Holiday Inn Express. I think that was a nice enhancement to the community. But it's dark getting there. There's no nice street lights on the way from when you turn off of 9th Street to go to the Holiday Inn. If they wouldn't have put a lot of lights in their parking lot, it would look pretty dark out there. And if you're a stranger in a community, well-lighted areas are attractive to you when you come in. So, just an example.
And I appreciate the example because I wouldn't even have thought of that. And I would imagine that is pretty dark going down through there.
It is.
Any other questions or discussions on this? If not, I would entertain a motion.
Well, I'm not bashful. I'll make a motion we approve the recommended projects for 2014 as submitted by staff with the notes submitted to commission concerning the entryways that we talked about.
And so to approve resolution number 14-1?
Yeah, put a number on 14-1.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
We'll let her fight that one out again, who she wants to have.
All right.
I do have a motion and a second. Any other discussion before going to vote? Hearing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Hearing none, motion passes unanimously. Any other business?
Before I go to other matters, Dan, do you have any updates on the levy raising and a time frame on certification?
Yeah, I couldn't add a whole lot to what Dean said, but I can give you a few updates here. Iron and Cloud was a good, or not Iron Cloud, 9th and Cloud was a good example of right-of-way acquisition. It took a while to get the right-of-way acquired for that quadrant, as you might have guessed, and it's just we do have it though, and it is set to go this summer, so that's a good sign for us. Centennial Road has been moved around a little bit, so that actually might change prior. I know it'll change prior to 2018, Commissioner Ryan, because that is something Jason or the city manager and Rod Friends have worked out, and I think it's actually going to move back up to 2016-ish possibly. So anyway, that's one that has been discussed. It's in pretty bad condition. The pavement's terrible. There's development out there. The hope is we could get some KDOT funding for it, so Dean was correct on that. That's something that's in the works. North Ohio was moved up a year. East Country Club was pushed back a year. So those are some of the things that were done. And then lastly on the
East Country Club Homes project?
No, it's just Country Club around Eastboro to Marymount and Iron. There's a section there by Marymount College that no curbs on either side, no pedestrian path really. I guess there is kind of a sidewalk maybe in a portion of that, but the pavement is old and needs replaced. And then there's a lot of
substations in there or something. And the new water substation and a pump station?
There's a
in it?
new pump station at Little Park there, and then there's also a new park equipment in the park, as well as the road is just, the asphalt is just really bad shape there. And it's asphalt over concrete, so the repair really isn't going to be as big of a repair as we had before. It was going to be like a $1.5 million job because you have to repair all the concrete, take it out, put it new like we did on Marymount. But based on just kind of balancing all the projects we have in the city, they asked, there was the concern that that was too expensive of a project for now. Can we overlay it again and do some major repair? Well, yes, we can. So we're going to actually do some major repair to the concrete, major repair to the asphalt and the curbs, and then try to improve the section between Iron and Country Club with curbs and a sidewalk, and try to make it more of our comprehensive plan impact street type of approach, but just not with hauling the whole thing out and replacing it, doing more of a major rehab. So that was why that was moved around a little bit as well. I don't know if that answers your question. Does that answer your question on East Country Club? Okay. Yeah, but the city limits only go to Eastboro, so that's as far as we, on the south side, I guess it goes to Holmes. You're right. So we still haven't figured
Well,
out.
where's the city stand on Holmes from Country Club all the way to
That one,
Magnolia?
not anywhere. It's out there a ways. It's not on the list as far as anything in the near future. Development would have to get out that far, I guess. It's getting, well, as Commissioner Welsh knows about kind of that area. It's just there's a lot of utility work that has to occur to really develop homes to Crawford, or homes from Country Club to Crawford. So that's one of the areas, and then all the way to Magnolia is another long-term project, just not on the horizon yet. And then the levy certification project, that had to go to the Corps of Engineers for review, and it has taken a long time for us to get through that process. So it's not something that happens a whole lot with the Corps. So I guess we're working through it, and we're getting their questions answered, and they shut down for a month in October, and they've blamed that on everything. So I can't tell you that that's the reason, but that's the reason they're telling us. So we just got the review back from them in January, and we're addressing all their comments now. So the hope is that project will occur this summer to fall, I guess, is what we're thinking. We typically don't like to work on the levee during flood season, and that runs from March till July, basically, so we'll have to balance that with when we actually do the project. Fall seems to be the best time for us.
To back up, I'm sorry to do this, but what Mr. Kennedy was talking about, North 9th Street, what can be done on that? I mean, that's almost into condemnation type thing, or take it over. I mean, you've got the truck stop, and then you've got the hotel, a lot of vacant land, and then you got not much of anything, but what can we do there? Can anything be done, or?
Anything is better than what's there.
Well, yeah, I mean.
Yeah, and you could, one could start by just driving over to Hayes and looking at what they've done on their Vine Avenue versus I-70, and bring that and replicate it back here. And it's going to take private business to be involved. It's going to take commitment on the part of property owners to say, hey, I want this to be attractive. And there'll have to be some incentives. There's got to be need and incentives both. And so clean it up. But the city's investment can be in enhancing the roadway and putting in some nice lighting up there. That's a good start. And that's something the city can do. And that's a big step.
Maybe we can get some straight lights this time.
Straight, yeah. These are okay, but maybe some straight ones that have real light.
Yeah. Bend them over a little bit. Yeah.
A couple more questions for Mr. Stack. From the biking perspective, what's $50,000 get you on the bike, walking, hiking trails?
It's
is that a quarter mile? Is that a mile?
Gets you about a half mile on our, and I should say that's on our levee trail, which has historically been our practice thus far. So
it seems like such a little bit of money. I wish they could push that along a little bit faster, considering all the other items and their size that are in the budget. It doesn't seem like a very bike-friendly town, and I'm aware that Bike Across Kansas this is their 40th year for Bike Across Kansas, never come to Salina until this year, and I've had the biking people tell me that's because Salina is just not very bike-friendly.
There is there's a group that's meeting monthly to try to help that, and so you will hopefully be seeing.
And they spoke to this group before.
Right,
too.
they have, and we're meeting with that group. And I think there'll be a chance this year possibly to maybe get a bike, what's that thing called? Basically approve an overall bike route map.
What we've been working on with that group is we've got a lot of stuff in the way of trails, but we're also working on street bike routes and emphasis on sharing the road and bike-friendly on-street streets. So we've been working with them on that, and to have a true master plan, we got to address off-street trails and on-street bike routes.
So what is that process of sealing cracks in the asphalt? I saw $400,000 in the budget for that.
Right.
Does that really work long-term, and is just a terribly cost-effective thing? Because it's lousy for bikes to ride on that stuff. And if you took an aerial view of Salina, it looked like a Jackson Pollock painting with all the little striping stuff around on the city streets.
Yeah, I mean, crack seal is the basic sealing of the cracks. The cracks are what get wider and fill with
It's not a
materials.
nice surface to drive on.
It's not the best surface to drive on. The hope is that we're doing a better job with, in the past, we piled a lot of material on top of the surface and left it there. So it was almost like a Band-Aid or a bump. And that still exists on quite a few of our streets in town. And you notice them when you drive over them, 8th Street being one of the worst, here just really close to the office. Crack seal arguably worked, but it's very bumpy. Well, now what we do, crack seal the crack, then we squeegee it. So it basically squeegees it off, makes it flat, hopefully. Most of the time that's working, but like you said, we still have a lot of crack seal that goes down. It looks like a lot of cracks, but it's 4 times less than microsurfacing and a lot less than mill and inlay, and it actually does seal the streets fairly well and keeps us from having more potholes than we have. This year has been a bad year, but comparatively, it's a lot of cities struggle with that. And if you don't crack seal at all, it just really makes it worse. I mean, the cracks blow up. That's just what they do. If they're not sealed, they blow up. So we feel like it's the basics. Wish we could do better. Have to put more money into micro. The commission has said more money into microsurfacing and mill and inlays, so you're going to hopefully see a better product in the long run, but it just started the last couple of years putting more money into these streets. So we feel like crack seal, to answer your question, is the basics. And I guess if you have a lot of streets that are bumpy currently that we've crack sealed, it'd be good to know about them because we either didn't squeegee them like we should have or we didn't flatten them out like we should have, basically.
It's smooth if you just tarred the whole street and didn't do those cracks.
Right. Yeah, that's right. This whole thing.
Well, I don't know about the cost of those things, but maybe a thought could be that when the bike routes are considered, that they not be treated that stuff.
Okay.
Just because doesn't look good and doesn't feel good on my set of buns anyway.
Yeah, we can look into that. We'd have to. One thing
That
the bike
should be
routes,
one of the criteria for being an on-street bike route is that you have a safe and smooth surface for bicyclists.
right. Yeah, so pavement marking would be something we'd have to do for that, but that's really more the on-street. The off-street is the $50,000 a year, and we've made pretty good progress over the years, but we're getting to the harder parts of town, north of North Street, and we have 3 railroad tracks to cross, and that is going to be tough. So we're still struggling through that. We can work our way around Thomas Park and the north side and go west until we hit the other side of the street, which is railroad, or the other side of the city, which is more railroad tracks and Old 40. So we're starting to get to where the easy parts are almost done, but we're going to keep working. Every year 50,000 goes and gets us a little farther than it did before, so that's the plan.
Well, I didn't really add up all of the items that it took to complete the trail all the way around, but it's really not big money. I was thinking $700,000 or $750,000, and
it's not the whole
it could
trail
be more
system.
aggressive.
The trail system can be completed fairly reasonably without the railroad crossings. Those are $100,000 a piece, and currently the railroad says no, we can't put any more in. So we're still working through that with them, and we may have to go off the trail a little ways and back over the crossing in the back. There's ways to do it, so we're gonna have to work those out. But we keep each year is a little better than the last. That's all we can do.
You'll take private donations from bikers, won't you?
Private donations.
So bike
and-
wash
yep.
or something? Maybe they could raise some money?
Bike wash. Bikinis.
Want to go for a ride, Tom?
I have just a general information question. Maybe anybody here can answer that. But on the 2015 projects, it mentions the Greeley Avenue Bridge, and it has a designation of $15,000 for the artwork. Am I remembering right that there was a city commission vote nixing the artwork on Greeley Avenue, or was I dreaming that?
Yeah, there was. Into the more elaborate bridge, I thought.
So there really isn't 15,000 allocated to art for that bridge then?
No.
Does anybody know? I'm
I
just
thought
curious.
when they went to the larger bridge that would actually span a trail under it, that I thought that was deemed to be the artwork and the additional expense, but I maybe misunderstood that also.
I don't know. Well,
I can look into that. I don't exactly know what was decided on that.
Because it
I think
won't be decided till we get to the 2015 list.
Sure,
Then
yeah.
it will be decided
Right.
for sure.
well, I'm for art getting some money put in there, but
And I think what Commissioner Perney said is, that did get discussed, was we'd make a nicer railing or a nicer retaining wall or some, prettier concrete along those lines that you can do pretty easy with the project. But is it called art? That was the part that they, just make it more aesthetically better looking was part of it.
yeah. Okay.
Dan, I have one more question, then Carl's
Yep.
got one, and then we'll, any more thoughts? I've probably had 2 or 3 people ask me about putting a light at Schilling and I-35. Any more talks of that at the overpass or coming underneath there to try and get that congestion out of the Walmart, I don't know what that is, Quick Shop? I mean, we've talked about that for many times on there. Well, you know you can't put a light right there, but I thought somebody had mentioned at one time of putting a light only coming east and holding up that traffic right there and getting that to switch. Any more thoughts about that?
There hasn't been, but that's been discussed before, so it'd be something that we need to look into. You're talking about on the off-ramp, coming off the highway, basically?
Yeah, I'm thinking if you come off of the highway there, you may come to the bottom of that off-ramp, and there may be a red light right there.
Yeah.
And/or if you're coming from Tony's Pizza, you would stop that traffic there. It's only trying to make that turn. The traffic seems to be okay going west, coming off of 9th Street, coming around there, but it's trying to hit both of those at the same time. You can usually time one pretty good, but it's hitting both of those at the same time. So I didn't make that up. I've heard that through years of being around the powers that be, possibly putting a light only at one side, and that was coming off the off-ramp when you're coming from Wichita or wherever, coming down there and being able to stop, and that the other traffic may have to stop coming from Tony's Pizza to give it a break for those people to come out of Wendy's and the Quick Shop to be able to turn back there.
Okay.
Yeah, I spent an hour there the other day making a 5-minute turn, so I can verify that.
Well, that really needs to be looked at. Dan looked at that, though, as I recall on this, we talked about this commission about controlling the way you can turn coming out of the Quick Shop there, and then that became a real issue, wasn't it?
Right.
With access to property, but I agree, maybe light right there at that intersection is what needs to happen.
Didn't we talk about making Riffle Drive one-way south so that you would have to loop around the thing counterclockwise? But we already have a traffic signal down at Riffle and 9th, and that would at least work more smoothly, but it...
I swear it doesn't work, 'cause I've sat
I agree.
at Tractor Supply.
Well, ride a bike and you can invoke the dead red rule.
That's an optional light. You really don't have to stop there. When it stays red for longer than an hour.
I think, I've sat there forever and the light hadn't changed.
All right.
I've got 2 completely unrelated other questions. I'd like to know what the city's interest rate is on the bonding, and if it went up a percentage point, how would that affect the budget? Would we be dramatically moving things around if there was a point up this year? And the unrelated one is, where does the lime go when you clean that out of the septic place?
Don't know the answers to that one. Dean, that's a financial question.
Yeah,
That's a question for Rod.
That's a Rod Franz question. And
then
historically, the bonds have been in the right around 3% interest. Our bond sales have been pretty favorable in terms of the interest that we pay on those. The lime question is related to the, you're talking about the
lagoons?
When they clean out
at
that
the
lagoon,
sewage.
yeah. That sounds like a lot of lime to me.
And it hasn't been done for quite some time.
Right.
I guess that would be a ask Martha Tasker question, we'll have to report that back to you.
Yep.
Commissioner Boxa says it goes into limeade, so.
Not mine.
I have one other matter that I would like to bring to you to have you consider authorizing staff to initiate some action and reporting back. We have before us a proposal to open and establish a hookah bar, and also a proposal for a vapor lounge. And we do not have any definition or any guidance on to determine where or under what circumstances or even if those types of uses should be permitted to locate within the Salina city limits. So we would
Lawrence has got one.
like you to authorize us to initiate an application where we would report back to you a definition and explanation for those uses, and then get some guidance from you on where or even if those uses should be permitted within the city limits.
Do you have a description of what they are? 'Cause I don't, you've got.
That's where they're going to start.
Well,
Yeah.
that's what we'll start with. A hookah bar is a bar where there is smoking that takes place through water pipes, and the city attorney has determined that if that involved tobacco, that would violate our smoking ordinance, but if it involved herbs or other substances that are used, that
marijuana, it'd
our
violate the
ordinance
state
only
law.
deals with tobacco. And then a vapor lounge is a place of communal smoking of e-cigarettes, which come in a variety of flavors and vapors. And so
And then Mr. Ravenkamp will be.
both of these are kind of circumventions that aren't addressed by our smoking ordinance.
Can't imagine why.
And so they're both recent phenomena that we're not up to speed on, so we'd like to bring you up to speed on those at your next, well, probably your second meeting in March. Our first meeting in March will be devoted to the comprehensive plan. We'll also ask David Neal, the county planner, to come and just kind of update you on the county's plan and its development code and how the county and city interrelate with each other.
Could somebody make a motion for that, please? For them to continue
I
doing a
would
motion
move
for that?
we ask staff to bring us information on hookah ordinances.
Hookah bars and
Hookah
vapor
bars.
lounges.
Yes, it is. I mean,
No.
that's the next step.
I have a motion needing a second.
It is not related to that.
Yeah.
Well, what's the difference between, do you have to have a bar for that when they smoke them out?
But y'all get together and
Oh, I
smoke.
will.
Y'all get together and
second
smoke
in a
'em.
second.
I have a motion and a second. Not
All
calling
in
for any
favor.
other discussion for him to expand on the hookah and the e-cigarette. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Hearing none, motion passes. Hearing no other matters, this meeting is adjourned.
Just this morning,
Motion to adjourn, yeah.